Welcome to MMA Fancast. My name's Luke. I am honored to have first-time guest of the show, Freddie, the Comeback Kid Rodriguez. Freddie, welcome to the show.
Hey, awesome. Thank you. And that was a great introduction, by the way.
Hey, I appreciate that. I appreciate that great nickname in the Comeback Kid. You're on the show to talk about your upcoming 247 Fighting Championships Sprawl in the Burgh, July 14th. BJJ kind of super fight match in an MMA cage that's coming up. But I want to pause because that's what we're going to talk about. But let's talk about the fact that you're a 4-1 pro MMA fighter, and all 5 of those pro fights came in 2022. So let's just jump in there. You started your amateur MMA career all the way back in 2014, built it up. Last amateur fight win was in 2021. So let's talk about 2022. What made 2022 the perfect time to go pro, and kind of walk us through the summary of your 5 fights in 2022?
Yeah, so my goal as an amateur was to just gain experience. And then once I felt like I was ready, I didn't want to rush it. I seen a lot of people who were in the Michigan MMA realm who rushed their pro career, and it kind of seemed to just fizzle out a little bit. And I just definitely didn't want to make that mistake. And so once I started really being able to put fights together and get finishes and start dominating in the amateur scene, I was like, okay, it's time to go pro. And so yeah, then in 2022 of February, I made my pro debut. And I knew I wanted to be active that year because I knew with my age where I was at. I think I made my pro debut at almost 29 years old. And so I knew I needed to catch up, and fighting 5 times in that year was my goal. And at the beginning of the year, I wrote it down on my goals list to be 5-0 at the end of the year, but it didn't work out that way. But I got 5 fights in that year, and I think that's almost, for a lot of fighters out there, that's almost 2 years of work. And
Yeah.
so for me to be able to accomplish 2 years of work in 1 year was really good. It gave me a little cushion to where I didn't feel like I needed to rush anymore. And so that was my goal. And yeah, so that was my intention going in, and that was why I fought so much that year.
Well, thank you for explaining that. Makes a lot of sense, taking into account the skills you had from amateur MMA, but also your age and wanting to be very active in your first year. You had 4 wins. 3 of those wins were by some type of stoppage. It looks like 2 were TKO and 1 was a doctor stoppage, probably, between rounds. That's typically when it happens. You had 1 decision win against Gavin Teasdale. We'll be talking a lot about that coming up. But kind of what has led you to be a finishing, a high finishing percentage? 3 out of 4 of your pro fights were finishes. Did you kind of want to do that in your pro career, and what has led to your success there?
Yeah, and that was kind of like what I was ready for. Once I started seeing the finishes come as an amateur, I knew I was ready to make that jump. And kind of it ties into kind of my wrestling mentality. I was a wrestler who really pushed the pace, and when I could feel a guy getting tired, I just smelled that blood and I would come for the finish, just trying to finish the match. I would get pins. I was a pinner. And so I think taking that type of mindset and just knowing that like I can push the pace, and that breaking guys mentally is how I wrestled. And so I knew I could carry that over, and it carried over really well. And just finishing guys, like I just like to punish people. And so, it kind of all fell into place for me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's interesting that as a wrestler who pushed the pace and got the finishes in the form of pins, that translated to pushing the pace and getting the finishes in the form of TKO. So that's really a cool kind of transition to the MMA world. So now that we talked a little bit about your finishes, let's talk about your 1 decision win, because that's obviously very important for us to discuss, because your decision win in pro MMA against Gavin Teasdale is now going to be a rematch of sorts. It's not a rematch in the sense that it's not MMA, but you are going to be competing against him again, but in BJJ. That's your opponent. For the people that are from the Pennsylvania area, they know Gavin Teasdale was a 4-time Pennsylvania state champion wrestler. That's only the 13th time in the history of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that's happened. So he's a big deal in the wrestling world. You welcomed him to pro MMA because it was his debut, and obviously you got a decision win against him. Let's talk a little bit about that fight from your perspective. What did you know about him going into the fight, and kind of walk us through your win against him, and then we'll transition to this match that's coming up.
Yeah, I knew Gavin as a competitor. Like I watched Gavin wrestle in high school and stuff like that, and I knew his name coming up just because he was so well known and he was just highly credentialed. So I knew who Gavin was, the whole time, and it kind of threw me off when they, offered the fight to me with the LFA that it was Gavin Teasdale, because he only had one fight up to that point, and so I thought that the fight was going to be a lot easier than what it was. He did surprise me with his ability. So with the film that we watched from his amateur debut, the kid made leaps and bounds from that time to the time we fought, and so the strides that I was making I knew were very, very, very similar in terms of looking back, the strides that he made, I was making similar strides at my time as well. And so that's why I thought that it was going to be, I thought it was going to be a finish. I didn't think he was going to be able to go the distance with me. And surprisingly, he did. And so the kid is very durable. He has what it takes to have a lot of success in this sport, which is heart and grit, and he'll keep coming forward. And so, and seeing him as a competitor like that, it brings the best out of me when a guy goes out there and fights like that, because it's forcing me now to also get out of my comfort zone and to push forward, through an entire fight. And so anytime you can go a full 15 minutes in a fight, you just come back and out with a lot of experience. And plus, when you share a cage with somebody, it's really intimate. And so you guys are both in there, you're doing something, whether people admit it or not, there's a lot of fear that it comes with fighting and stepping in a cage. You're facing the fight or flight mechanism, and obviously you've trained for the fight or flight mechanism, but when you get into a fight, it's heightened. And so when two people step in a cage and they're experiencing that fight or flight response and they have to take control of it, I think it becomes a really intimate thing. And so to share a cage with somebody for 15 minutes, at the end of the day, we will always have that in common. So to me, it's always respect. And so, at the end of our fight, I raised both of our arms up because I had to give him props. And, like I said, it was just, what I take from these fights, when I share a cage with somebody, as long as there's no animosity that was built up in the, leading up to the fight, he was respectful. And so, for me, it's about, basically what martial arts is about, which is integrity, honor, respect. And so I carry that with me while I'm in the cage. And so to share it with him, that was my outlook on sharing the cage with him.
Yeah, I think that's a great outlook. Like you mentioned, the martial arts approach really is that it's a very unique experience. Sure, they're your opponent, but you get better by fighting a better opponent, right? We see that a lot in MMA, that if you have a good night and win like you did against Gavin Teasdale, he's made you better, and so there's gratitude that goes both ways, of course. So I think that's a great mindset and attitude to have. So let's talk about the fact that here you are doing a BJJ submission only match against him. It's going to be similar in the sense it's going to be an MMA cage. And obviously there'll be a lot of Gavin Teasdale fans in the crowd because it's in Pittsburgh and he's from Pennsylvania. So talk to me about how did this come together? Is it something you sought out? Did Jim Mooney or Hunter get a hold of you and kind of like what is having you pause pro MMA for a little bit and take this BJJ fight match? Yeah.
Yeah, so one of my teammates, Mondo Gutierrez, he's on the card. And so when I seen that card, I seen his matchup get announced and I looked at it and I was like, that's in Pittsburgh. And then I was like, I was like, that's the same promotion that Gavin made his amateur debut in. So, when we watched the film, it was the
Yeah.
same promotion. And I'm like, I know he's from Pittsburgh. I'm sure he has some pull. So I messaged him and was like, hey, bro, would you be interested in grappling, because, that's just how I am. I'm a competitor. So, to go out there and to go out to Pittsburgh and to be able to compete against a high level opponent in a grappling match, I think would have been super cool. Right next to my teammate Mondo, and a lot of our guys are going on the card. Gray Maynard's going out there. And so I hit him up and he was like, yeah, let me see what I can do. And so he helped push that to let it happen. And, and so then here we are now, looking forward to this match.
I mean, that's incredible. And I think that goes towards obviously both of your guys' competitiveness and professionalism. And I always love to give Jim Mooney credit for matchmaking, but in this case, you were the matchmaker in the sense of reaching out. I think, like you said, it's good when competitors don't have that animosity. Obviously, in MMA, sometimes they do. Sometimes, like, I don't think DC and John Jones will be on speaking terms for a very long time. Maybe they will at some point. But it is kind of cool that you saw the opportunity. Mando's fight has been announced for a while, so it makes sense that you kind of put two and two together, that it's the same promotion. It's the first time 247 is doing the BJJ side of things, something that the owner, Ryan Milton, has wanted to do all the way back to right around the start of COVID, but obviously that changed things. I think it's a really cool way to really emphasize BJJ. Have you done tournaments? And if so, how do you think being in a cage and kind of having that non-tournament where it's more super fights, how do you think that's going to go with BJJ?
Yeah, I've done one BJJ tournament ever. I've grappled a lot of, BJJ and training and stuff like that. It didn't. I ended up going up a weight class and was going against higher belts. And I wanted to challenge myself, so I was a white belt at the time and grappled a blue belt and a brown belt, and so it didn't work out in my favor. But that was the only tournament experience I have. But in terms of like grappling in a cage, I feel like it's going to give a more, I feel like it's going to be a little more aggressive, I would think, than like, I feel like tournament BJJ, like, yes, they're out there, they're, trying to actually hurt each other and stuff like that. But I think the cage is going to give it another level of tenacity, I would say, in terms of just getting after it. But yeah, I think I'm excited. I've never grappled in a cage before, so I'm gonna try to take the same approach I do when I fight.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. As a pro MMA fighter, you're very comfortable in the cage. I think the BJJ world, I think this is a bigger stage in the sense of tournaments are great. Tournaments kind of birth BJJ in the sense of, doing multiple matches in the same day. But I think the fact that this is going to feel a lot like a fight card in the sense that it's one match at a time, walkouts, announcements, and it's going to feel much more like a production that BJJ, unless you're Gordon Ryan and stuff, doesn't really have. Talk a little bit. Obviously, both you and your opponent have trained cage stuff because you've been MMA fighters. How unique do you think it's going to be that this BJJ submission only has a cage where the cage is in play? It's not one of those wrestling mat BJJ where if you push them out, you reset or anything like that. The cage is in play just like it would be in MMA, obviously without strikes, still a BJJ rule set. But how do you think that's going to play into the submission only BJJ game?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could definitely play a part on takedowns. I think it could play a part on, if a takedown happens on the cage, using the cage to put more pressure on your opponent, and put them in an uncomfortable position because those cages don't feel very good. And I think like in a fight, you have a lot more adrenaline running than you would in a grappling match. So I think you're gonna feel the cage a little more in a grappling match than you would a fight. So you could actually probably inflict a little more pain in a grappling match with the use of the cage than I would think in a fight, because you really don't feel the cage at all in a fight. But I think you would feel it in a grappling match.
Yeah, I appreciate that answer. That makes a lot of sense that in particularly a professional MMA fight, you've got knees and elbows and head kicks. You've got a lot to worry about where the cage is not as significant. But I agree with you. I think in a BJJ situation, the cage could really become another weapon in the sense that, bouncing on one leg like you do in wrestling comes up, and kind of doing that comes up short if you're up against the cage and you can trap your opponent. And obviously it'll be very interesting since you and Gavin have already, like you said, shared 15 minutes at a pro level fight. I think that's a very unique experience to have. How do you see this matchup? You mentioned you've been increasing leaps and bounds. Obviously, you were complimentary to Teasdale in the sense that he's been increasing his game. So how do you see it going, and how do you see kind of the excitement and entertainment value for the fans?
I think it's gonna be a lot of scrambling. I think there's gonna be I think it's gonna be fireworks from start to finish until somebody gets that finish. I think I I don't know how it's gonna go. I mean, obviously I'm gonna go out there and try to get the finish. I'm not gonna rush no finish, but I plan on going in there and grappling and wearing them down, and um and just I plan on taking it to the deep waters and seeing who comes out on top when we get to the deep waters. And yeah, so that's the way I see it going. And I would say cardio wise, I think it would lean a little toward me. But other than that, I mean, he might have a little size on me. But yeah, I just see it being a really good competitive match. And I think it's gonna be exciting. And so yeah, I think it's gonna be real scrambling.
Well, I appreciate your prediction, and I think it's going to be very entertaining. I already know the crowd's going to be involved. The storyline's going to be a lot of fun to talk about since you guys have already faced each other in a pro MMA fight. I think that's the only one on the card that had that situation of being there. There is an amateur heavyweight match where the amateur heavyweights had already fought for 247. So that's kind of an exciting rematch of types. But yours the only one that I know of that's a pro. You mentioned a little bit of size. I believe your first fight was at 125, and this one, according to Tapology, is going to be at 140 pounds. Makes sense. I know BJJ and grappling, you don't cut as much weight. It's not the pro MMA ranks. Is that something that like you're feeling comfortable because you won't have as much as a weight cut? I think people tend to do BJJ at more of a natural weight.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's gonna be good for both of us. I think we're gonna be able to come out there and not really have to be trying to recover from a weight cut or doing anything like that. And so I think we'll be more fresh. We'll be able to go a little longer. Things like that. Yeah, honestly, I could see the match potentially going 30 to 35 minutes or something like that. But yeah, I could see it going that long.
Well, that is would be a very exciting thing. You're going to need to check with the rule set because, from my understanding, knowing 247 a little bit, check with your contract. I believe it's 1 6-minute round. It is.
Oh, is it?
Yes, it is. I would definitely confirm that. I'm comfortable saying
Okay.
that, but just so you're aware, it is a submission only. And so that everybody knows, the reason why Freddie would think that this could go 30 or 35 minutes is I've been to submission only tournaments where they're unlimited time. This is a submission only 6 minute.
Right, that's what I
I
thought,
completely
yeah.
understand. I thought the same thing until I was corrected by Ryan Middleton doing interviews for other people thinking submission only meant. And obviously with 23 matches, I think so far announced, something like that, 20s, you can't go, you can't go unlimited time. It would be a 9-hour card.
Right, no,
So
yeah.
just so everybody knows, it's submission only, but it's a 6-minute no break round. If the round ends and there hasn't been a submission, to my understanding, I could be wrong, but to my understanding, it will be decided by the referee. I do not, the win-loss will be decided by the referee. I do not believe there will be judges. It wouldn't be a huge surprise to me if they have a judging panel, just like they do in MMA, if it goes to a decision. But I believe in the BJJ world, it is the referee who's obviously closest to the action, and we'll see a lot more of the intricacies of submission attempts and things that will make that decision. But confirm all that I'm saying. But yes, everything that night
Okay, yeah.
is 6 minutes. Yeah. There's a couple 10
That
minutes.
definitely helps me out then. I'm glad that we figured that out.
Hey, absolutely. And it'll allow you to push the pace. I do know that when it's a truly unlimited match, having watched 45-minute, hour-long matches before, there's a lot more understandable defensive and waiting, because when it's an unlimited time and someone will have to submit, obviously it becomes much more of a chess match. Whereas you mentioned pushing the pace. I know Gavin likes to wrestle and grapple at a very high level. So I think 6 minutes is a great period of time to really have a lot of action, but not a lot of those rest periods, because you do have to get a submission within 6 minutes. I know that the main event.
I think it's gonna be 6. I think it'll be 6 minutes of fireworks then.
Yeah, there you go.
Man.
Hey, it's back to the fireworks. I'm glad I could say that. I believe the main event is 10 minutes, and there may be 1 or 2 other 10-minute rounds, 10-minute matches because of contract, but I believe yours is 6 minutes. So glad I could clear that up for the fans of you being back in Michigan. This is where I recommend that they download the 247 Live app on any device. That allows them to then buy the pay-per-view through the app. 247 Live is a great app. It's really cool that 247 Fighting Championships has its own app. And if they buy the pay-per-view through the app, then they can cast it up onto a TV, I believe through Apple something. They could check more for details on 247fighting.com. But I do know that Ryan Middleton, the owner of 247, is really proud of the fact that somebody could get the pay-per-view and then watch it on like a full TV. So it'd be a really great opportunity for people to support you, and they can select your name at checkout when they're buying the pay-per-view to support you as well. So that's a way, even though you're the Michigan fighter, for you to still have support like that. Speaking of support, let's talk about your sponsors. You're a 4-1 pro MMA fighter, so I'm sure you've got some supporters behind you. Let's talk about the sponsors, and then we'll wrap up. And I can't wait to see you live in action for 247 Fighting Championships Sprawl in the Burgh. So who are you thankful for coming in as far as your sponsors go?
Yeah, so first I got to thank my teams, Team Mercy Lago out of Lansing, Michigan. A lot of tough, great fighters out of there. Coach Joaquin Rodriguez of Mercy Lago. I got to thank them for their support and their continued efforts in pushing me. I have to thank Warrior Way Martial Arts Alliance out of Walled Lake, Michigan. You got my brother Austin Bashi, and there's a great system out there. I love those guys. They have a great energy and atmosphere always. And so, and then to move into my sponsors, I got to thank my chiropractor, Dr. Jordan Clark at Hands On Health Chiropractics. And then I got to thank Dr. Lauren Lobert out of Apex Physical Therapy. They make sure that if I got any little minor injuries or anything like that, they get me back going. I have to thank Mystery Concrete and Construction, my cousin John Bonifacio out of Lansing, Michigan. I also have the Good Barber. He's my barber. He actually cut me up today.
Hey, there you go.
Ryan Maudry. I got to give him a shout out. And then I have Belief Over Opinion. It's a clothing company that where we stand for, overcoming adversity and standing strong in our beliefs over the opinions of others and the status quos and just staying true to yourself. And so that's a great clothing brand out there that out of North Carolina. And then I gotta make sure I don't forget anybody. I have I believe that's all. And if I am missing somebody, then I apologize. Oh yeah, Tropical Touch Spa out of Lansing, or well, Tropical Touch Spa out of Lansing. They're a one of a kind. They do acupressure, they massage therapy. They're all over. I even think they're in like Florida. They're moving over to like Columbus. But it's like they got like bikinis and they give massages and they do a great job. So super professional. And James Lee, he and Jared Brooks, those are the guys that are running that show. So thank you to those guys for helping me out and supporting me. But yeah, I think that's everybody. So thank you all for your support, and I hope you guys will be tuned in to 24/7 Championships.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. It's been great having you on. You've been listening to Luke Payson for MMA Fancast with first time guest on our show, Freddie, the Comeback Kid Rodriguez. Thanks so much for being on the show. Can't wait to see you live in action. Sprawl on the Burgh 1. Thanks so much.
Thank you, brother.
You got it, brother. All right, take it easy.